Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adi Winarso, Head of Economic Department at the Indonesian Embassy in London. Today, we have wonderful speakers who have kindly made time to join us in the first Indonesia Digital Roundtable Series, Fintech Opportunities and Trends in Indonesia, the largest digital economy in ASEAN. We have His Excellency Mahendra Siregar, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, who will give us the keynote speech. And also we will have Pak Triyono Gani, Executive Director and Head of Fintech Office at Indonesia's Financial Services Authority, or OJK. And also we have Pak Jason Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of OVO, leading fintech unicorn in Indonesia. Towards the end, we will hear some closing remarks from Pak Adam Tugio, Deputy Chief of Mission, Indonesian Embassy in London. Esteemed speakers, you are speaking to a live audience of around 100 individuals, mostly from UK and some participants from Indonesia. Today's sessions will be moderated by Stephen Marcelino, the chairman of GIPA, Global Indonesian Professional Association. Currently, Stephen is the Asian Capital Market Director at the Accenture UK, a global management consulting firm. If you like to question at any time during the session, please submit your question through the Q&A box. If time permits, our moderator will call on you to ask those questions live with your video and audio. Therefore, when you are given a chance to ask questions live, please turn on your video and unmute your audio. Without further delay, please allow me to welcome our moderator for the day, Stephen Marcelino. Please, Stephen.
Thank you, Mas Alvin. Welcome to you all to today's Indonesia Digital Roundtable Series. Good afternoon, those who are joining from Indonesia, as well as very good morning to those who are with me in the UK. As Pak Alvin mentioned, I'm pleased to be able to moderate today's discussion with my hat and capacity as chair of GIPA and ASEAN Capital Market Lead in Accenture UK, where I spearhead all of our Southeast Asian initiatives from our London office. So Accenture projected that global fintech industry will reach 350 billion valuations by 2020, with average growth of 25% that come mostly from emerging markets. And 70% of this total valuation will come from the fintech unicorn and scale-ups category. What's interesting in the past 2-3 years, these fintech unicorns and scale-ups have begun internationalizing and enter new markets across Asia Pacific, for example. Now, if we look into Indonesia specifically, pre-COVID-19, end of 2019, Indonesia's digital economy is projected to reach 133 billion, and that is already 33% higher than previously estimated by Google and Temasek report. Today, we are seeing major shift in consumer behaviors and spending to online across Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, where digital payment is predicted to capture 50 cents of every dollar spent in ASEAN in the next few years. Now, in the post-COVID-19 world, all of these trends will just even get accelerated. And it won't surprise anyone that the total value of that 130 billion can easily be reached by early 2021, which is just a few months from now. Within that context, COVID-19 crisis certainly may present some opportunities. Hence, today's Indonesia Digital Roundtable Series, we're going to explore fintech opportunities and trends at the Southeast Asia largest digital economy, Indonesia. Now, this session is initiated and led by Indonesian Embassy in London, working together with the Central Bank of Indonesia, Indonesia Investment Promotion Centre London, as well as GIPA. And thanks to all of our partners who are joining us with us today from Tech UK, Fintech Scotland, Fintech Circle, Tech Nation, GIPA UK, Department of International Trade, Bridgeham Indonesia, as well as UK ASEAN Business Council. As Pak Alvin mentioned, after the keynote, we'll go straight to a panel discussion where we have two amazing speakers. And after that, we'll have a Q&A where we'll invite live questions from the audience later on. And we'll have a closing remarks from the Charge d'Affaires at the Indonesian Embassy in London. Now, moving on, it is our honor to have Indonesia's Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Mahendra Siregar. He was previously Indonesian ambassador to the US, also previously the chairman of Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board, or BKPM, as well as the Vice Minister of Finance in his previous roles. Personally, I had a pleasure to also catch up with him over the past few weeks, so it's great to have Pak Mahendra with us today. So over to you, Pak Mahendra, for some keynote remarks.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. And first of all, I welcome this initiative, this web seminar, and this is something that we have become more in the last few months, and I think this also would set the trend going forward. I welcome the initiative of the Embassy, of Adam, the Chargé d'Affaires, and the whole team at the Embassy for this initiative, and I think this very much highlights the best of the two countries, the two economies. On one hand, the UK and London, of course, as the center, is famous of its hub of the, I would say, the conventional financial services sector, but now also has become one of the most important hub for the Fintech, for the new economy financial services center. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other, from the startups, from the investment aspects, as well as from the fellow regulators, because there are many challenges as well as opportunities that we can be benefited from learning to each other. And I also welcome the speaker of this seminar, Triyono Gani of the OJK and Jason Thompson of the OFO. Well, I have very short 3 points, I would say, but before that, Stephen mentioned about my previous work before being the Vice Minister here, but he did not mention I also used to manage a venture capital in the Silicon Valley area to invest in several startup companies there, including a couple of fintech. So I know not only the good and sometimes unbelievable stories or success stories of these startups or companies, but I also understand the fight, the struggle, and the challenges they even in the Silicon Valley area, let alone in other parts of the world where startup and digital economy at that time was still considered as new. But even now, I think we are still trying to continue adjusting ourselves with the development, sometimes too fast development, innovations, and progress happening in the digital sector, and especially in the financial technology. My 3 points would focus first on I would say, the up-to-date lesson learned from what we are now doing during the COVID-19 situation. And I would say, to a certain extent, this would become the new normal before long. Because while we had anticipated in the past before the COVID-19 situation took place, that something like this would happen in most of our working time, study time, or even leisure time. But of course, the COVID-19 situation accelerated the process toward the new normal, that these our activities on online, on digital, on virtual elements, or relying on the internet. Well, what I could say of the lesson learned on the Indonesian side, and particularly in the urban areas, is that basically it's the digital world that saves us in our daily activities. If this were happen or had happened, let's say 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, I think we would have a much worse situation than today. The fact that we are able to a large extent minimize the potential damage in our economy, in our activities, in our daily transactions, and that happens in the business and households, simply because we now have the digital world, which otherwise it would make the whole economic performance and quality of life worse than today. So, of course, there are several sectors or business activities that are more prominent, affecting our life during this situation than the rest. Among others, we see that what we have witnessing in the past, the e-commerce businesses have now becoming not only the marketplace or platform for individual merchants or traders, but now basically are the marketplace for everybody, including the large brand, large multinational companies channeling or selling the products. So this, again, as a result of this acceleration as a cause of the lockdown or partial lockdown of the daily life that we have. But of course, the most prominent feature in our day-to-day life today during the COVID situation is the online transportation, guys. Basically, without the online transportation delivery, we will have no economy, or put it, our GDP growth that is forecast to probably just grow by plus 1% for the whole semester of this year, January to June, would simply drop to negative 3 or 4% without this type of services that we have. While, of course, as I said, the e-commerce and the online transportation is very key, but what really bridge or really complete the whole ecosystem is the e-payment, is the e-money, is the Fintech, basically, that really serve the whole ecosystem to be very effective. So I think this is very much I would say, the accelerated version of what we are going to do, and I don't think that we would be ever go back to the old normal before the COVID-19. At the most, we would continue doing this for exactly like this for the next 6 to 12 months. But meanwhile, we also have to embrace the new normal in a broader life, because without the proven vaccine and proven therapeutical medicines, we still have to live like what we are doing in the coming months. And of course, we cannot continue with the lockdown and partial lockdown forever, because that would severely hit the economy in a unprecedented level. So that is my first point, that we are now already living the future life which otherwise would happen without the COVID-19. Now, the second point I would like to put forward is that in the past, we tend to live in the two different worlds. The let's say the new economy world, and then the old economy world. That applies to all sectors, including the financial services. We have the Fintech, and then we have the conventional banking and insurance and wealth management services and what have you. So we always have these two worlds in the past. And when we do the transaction within one world, then we have as a customer to adjust to that world. And then we switch to the other world and adjust ourselves again. But now I think this merge or convergence of the two worlds would happen sooner rather than later. And of course, the norm of the day would be the digital-based and internet-based business practices. The big question is, of course, whether the conventional business, the conventional financial services are able to adjust themselves in their business transaction, in their business model to adopt the tech-based business model and transactions. That will be the big question. For the digital world, is of course the challenge is not only to disrupt the current services, financial services sector, but the challenge is, of course, how to enrich, how to expand, how to improve further the quality of life of the customers. So not just to replace and disrupt the old economy sector in a way. So that would be the challenge, but also the opportunity, because like Indonesia, we don't have to have Indonesia, less than 50% of the adult population owns banking account. So those who don't have banking account do not have to go through the banking account to go through the digital account holder. They can just go shortcut to the digital account ownership, and of course, with the hope the services would also be broader and customized at the same time to them. So this is what I think would be the great opportunity going forward. Now, the last point is on the regulatory side. Well, I would say that despite most of the regulatory institutions or personnel would like to embrace as much as possible the business activities of the digital economy, or in this case, the financial technology sector, but most or many of the regulations or the monitoring parameters and factors and variables on the prudentials, on the governance, on the customers' protections are still very much copying the old economy model. I think that is the challenge, because then you are trying to fit one thing, with an equipment or a tool that not really designed for that particular element. So I think that is the biggest challenge, and this is where I think we also need to promote collaborations between and communications between startups, business owners, investors, and regulators, as well as among fellow regulators. So that would be my 3 points. I again welcome the opportunities. Indonesia is, of course, it's a big market as itself, but also as a hub for ASEAN. For you who might not remember or not recognize that the ASEAN population is basically 1.5 times of the whole EU population. Of course, EU minus the UK now. And of course, Indonesia alone of 270 million population is already 60% of the total EU population, with the difference that Indonesian average age is 29 years old, and the EU's average age is 43 years old. So in terms of demographic condition, of course, again, the digital ecosystem would fit very well with Indonesia and ASEAN. And thank you for inviting me to be present in this very interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Mahendra. Thanks for providing with insightful remarks and some of key elements that I'm sure will further stimulate the discussion later on. Moving on next, we have our first speaker, Jason Thompson, is the CEO of OVO. OVO is a fintech unicorn and the leading digital payment service in Indonesia based on transaction value. And recently, Jason has announced that OVO will be entering a number of different new business units, different business lines within OVO. Previously, Jason was heading a number of different teams with his proven track record in Europe from Euronet and Microsoft, pioneering payments in Microsoft. So I thought it would be good to turn Jason first and to really get his perspective around the thriving Indonesia fintech industry and how does he compare that with the UK fintech industry. I thought it would be good if Jason could also mention a number of COVID-19 related learning platforms and how fintech sees those relative opportunities. And I'm sure all of the audience would want to hear a little bit about OVO's brief success stories, how Jason bring OVO to become a top unicorn player, and again, an Indonesian company led by a British man. I'm sure that was another story, but Jason, over to you.
Terima kasih Stephen, Pak Mahendra, Pak Triyono. Suata kehormatan berada di sini. It's a privilege to be here and it's a privilege to represent Indonesia today. Thank you. Hey guys, it's great to be here representing Indonesia. It's been a long journey. It's been 3.5 years in the making, and I feel extremely privileged to be here in Jakarta today and also to lead an amazing company like OVO. You know, I think often people see these announcements that we make maybe in Indonesia and around Southeast Asia, and they see how OVO has grown, but like with any business, it's the result of not only hard work, but it's the result of partnerships. And a lot of our partnerships are not just with traditional commercial companies, but also with Ojoka and BI, the regulators here that have really helped us frame our business and do good. So it's certainly been an interesting journey. Now, I think when I arrived in Indonesia for the first time 3.5 years ago, I actually knew very little about Indonesia. I knew geographically that it was big. I knew it was made up of many islands, and I knew that the country had many textures. But I didn't really know about it. So I arrived at the airport. I was told to be careful and watch myself, that it was dangerous. I got a taxi. I got a Grab. I jumped in the Grab, which is like Uber of Southeast Asia. I went to my office, they took my identity, and I went to the office. And I was like, wow, this is pretty much like in any other country. The country is wonderful. The people's values are very strong, values around family, around integrity, around religion, and around food. Food is very good in Indonesia. So, you know, I don't think it's terribly different in that respect. It's not hard to come to work in Indonesia. But there's some things that I will share with you that helped me along the way and lessons that I've learned. Indonesia is a huge country, and it's a mobile-first economy, like no other economy I know. And I've had the privilege of opening businesses in Russia, Middle East, Turkey, China, and indeed running businesses all across Europe as well. But Indonesia is very different. First of all, we're a very young economy, and we are entirely mobile first. So if we think of somebody like Ant Financial or Tencent, they had a wealth of banks wrapped around the fintech. So the identity, the funding, and a lot of the infrastructural issues were actually answered by the bank. And today you can't cash out of any of those wallets other than to a bank. Indonesia is very different. Everything in Indonesia happens mobile first. There's around 115 million people a month that use WhatsApp. Everybody uses WhatsApp all of the time. It's like lifeblood here. And so, you know, now at the moment in COVID-19, my favorite restaurant WhatsApp me and says, hey, Jason, WhatsApp your order. And we'll just send it over. And you can pay there, or you can pay with OVO, or you can do a bank transfer. Nothing will stop Indonesian people. They're entrepreneurial. They're not people of privilege, historically. So that means they won't let things stop them. Be that an earthquake, be that a tsunami, or be that COVID-19, it will not stop progress in Indonesia. There is a resilience and entrepreneurialism here like I have never witnessed before. And so people just find a way. They don't complain, they just get out there and they make it happen again. So I've had to learn about this. I've had to learn about the way people do business. And you have to localize. So when businesses come to Indonesia, you know, people ask me why OVO is successful and financialism. I would say one thing: you have to localize. And that doesn't mean localize in Indonesia. That means you have to localize Medan, Surabaya. You know, you have to think about Lombok, you have to think about Bali, you have to think about Yogyakarta. You have to think about these cities, and it's a city problem. So you have to win over the cities, and that means you have to go there and learn about the economy, and learn about the infrastructure, and learn about the people, and you have to tailor your solution. So localization is the biggest key to Indonesia. Number two, with this young, highly mobile group of people, they're forgiving. They want you to test and trial. They want to learn. So you can do things with the people and test and trial and share, and they will respond very quickly. And if it's something that it feels good for them, they won't use it. It's a consumer meritocracy. But on the same, they're forgiving. So if something doesn't work and then you do something that does work, they'll adopt and give you feedback and continue to grow with you. So that the consumer fintech relationship is very dynamic. So my number two learning is embrace your merchants, embrace your consumer. You must embrace them. And that means it can't just be put in a batik, that's the local material, type material on the cover of an application. The application has to be the way that the Indonesian people think. And it is slightly different. The next thing I believe is a big learning for us is transparency with the regulator. My experience with regulators around the world is it's a very formal and a very measured interaction. Here in Indonesia, the interaction with the regulator is a lot more informal. There is the formal process and the informal process. To a large degree, they are still formal, they're recorded, they are high integrity events, but there's a lot more interaction in what the country needs and how we need to operate together and how we need to think about things. So at one time, my business had 4 different sandboxes running. And you know, I'm very grateful to Padriono for the amount of privilege he's given us in different sandboxes and testing us and seeing our relevance. So, you know, at the moment we're talking about digital banking, we're talking about new scoring systems, we're talking about new lending systems. It's dynamic. The country moves very quickly. So, you know, this localization, this highly relevant customer base, and then the way you work with the regulators, I think are the 3 pillars I would anchor on for success. OVO is now serving on a monthly basis around 15 million people. We're predominantly a payments business. We're kind of Alipay for Indonesia. We're the number 1 in the country. We have very high market share. And I think that's because of relevance rather than advertising. Our economics are the best in the country. I test all the economics against my competition. So my promotion TPV ratio is very low, and we ensure that's the case. So the way we really develop this is taking a customer first approach. What are the problems that we're solving? One of the biggest problems in Indonesia, especially at this moment in COVID-19, is moving money. If you're somebody that works in Jakarta and your family are in your family is in Kalimantan or Borneo, as you guys will know it, Kalimantan very much is very hard to get money there. But OVO is accepted nationally, and P2P works instantly. So dealing with eKYC, dealing with cash out systems, where we use on-demand drivers as an ATM for cash in, where we use convenience stores for cash out, we have to be very agile. So OVO has grown rapidly over the last 3.5 years. And I remember my main competitor saying in the press 3.5 years ago that he doesn't really think of OVO as a competitor. And that really gave me the bite. But I guess my main feedback to you is Indonesia is open. It's open to foreign. It's open to investment. It's open to entrepreneurialism. It's open to innovation. But you have to integrate. And that means transparency with the regulator, with the government, and with the people. You know, and the other thing is that I'm very passionate about. People should not just come here to take profit. When the country was struggling some years ago, there was companies that didn't come here then and provide relief when we had national disasters. They didn't provide clean water or food to our people. And so if people make money here, I expect them to spend money here and not take the money away. So that transparency from the governance of the company, the domicile nature of the business, the domicile tax nature of the business, and domicile data is also critically important to us. And it is closely regulated, and so it should be. But Indonesia is very much open. And the way we operate today has allowed us to grow quickly and has allowed us to grow hand in hand with a regulator. I'm talking a lot about regulation because I think in fintech it's vital. In my day job, I guess regulation takes up maybe 10% of my time. But the reality is here, this is pure advice. There is some large family-owned conglomerates and large businesses here. So I would say, you know, look at the marketplace, look at the type of ecosystem that you want to work in, look at the advantage that your technology, your operations, or your experience brings to the market, and then bring that knowledge and that experience and demonstrate it to the market. I've seen so many foreign companies come here and succeed with good relationships, with good local businesses. And I'm one of them. You know, probably this year, one of my shareholders will probably be the largest injection of capital from a foreign fintech in Indonesia. And so you see how this works. So very, very positive. I can't emphasize it. In terms of localization, you really need to know your customers here. I spend a lot of time in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt on the back of a Grab or a Gojek, which is like a scooter. And I get around and I see my customers and I know their names and I ask them questions and I ask them where I'm failing and what I'm not doing right. And they tell me accurately, vividly what I'm not doing right. Marketing is an area we've got a huge amount to learn. They normally tear our marketing apart, make it more local, use Indonesian slang. You know, it's like other mandaps and things like this, which is like, it's just cool Indonesian words. And they show us how we communicate with a younger audience. So we learn so much from going on the field. And whenever our investors come to Indonesia, the first thing I do is take them out to 3 or 4 hours, just going around and learning what's happening on the ground and how we're impacting life. Moving on to COVID-19. I think to a degree, the world was impacted way before Indonesia. You know, we saw what happened in China, and because of SARS, we are a lot more sensitive than Europe to the impact of epidemics or pandemics. So everybody was already nervous. Everybody's watching what is happening in China. No blame culture, just learning what is happening, how is it happening, what's the distribution, how do we have to think about this? And I could see that happening all around us. So we actually established a COVID-19 war room long before the government started making announcements of COVID-19 impacting Indonesia. We took our CPO, Albert, and asked him to run a dedicated war room, and we staffed it. We wrote a COVID-19 response letter to Bank of Indonesia and OJK, the two regulators. And this was really positioned as a saying, how, you know, we're ready. When Indonesia's ready, we're ready. Because essentially, fintech is also a way of breaking the cycle of transmission because it's a non-touch, it's a social distancing product. We had no response from OJK or Bank of Indonesia, and we didn't expect any because it was we knew that they would be planning and executing. Today, We have engineers inside the government. We have product people working on programs such as Kartu Prakerja, which is a government dispersal program. We are working directly with Patetem, the Minister for SME. We've had Pak Luhut, who's one of the other ministers, connect with us, and Pak Wismantana, who's the Minister for Transport, join our town hall and tell us what he needs for us. 50% of my organization is mobilized supporting COVID-19 initiatives of Pak Jokowi, our president, and we're exceptionally proud to be doing that. And we're doing that because it's the right thing to do, and that our company is red and white, it's Indonesian. But we're also doing that because it is accelerating the relevance of fintech. People are realizing the limitations of physical produce. One of the biggest impacts in Indonesia of COVID-19 right now is the disruption to supply chain. With a shared economy food platform such as Grab, similar to Uber Eats, more for the SMEs, you can connect, distribute products and move them quickly. So we did a simple test on a mass movement of products and on our 500 kilograms of fresh produce with Grab. Not to SMEs. We were acting as a virtual distributor on a broken distribution channel. So I think in terms of COVID-19, fintech is a really constrained domain, but also in the government domain. And I think post-COVID, we won't return to the old world. This is an important usage model, and we need to develop our product better and faster to serve the government. I'm going to stop there. I just want to say that after 3.5 years of living here, I absolutely love Indonesia. I love working with my team. I'm wearing a local shirt tonight because we have something called Buka Bersama, which is where we break fast together in the Lebaran period. You know, I'm a Christian and my team know that, but there's no issues here. People respect people and religion is a part of our life, but there's no conflict. The people want me to join, they want me to pray with them, they want me to enjoy, they want to break fast, and they want me to fast with them and enjoy drinking the tea at the end of the day when we enjoy Buka Bersama. It's a wonderful experience. So if you ask me, you know, I could go back to the best job in the world in London tomorrow, or I can keep leading OVO in Indonesia. There's no choice for me. It's Indonesia every time. So over to you guys. Terima kasih.
Thanks, Jason. I think certainly these type of snippets and frontline insights that fast moving, and again, amazing to hear OVO's story and your integral movement. The fact that you're focusing 50% of your kind of day-to-day activities around COVID-19 handling and how you integrate with not just the BI and OJK, but the wider kind of ministries and agencies. I think that's fantastic. Now, that leads to a nice segue to the regulator speaker. And at these uncertain times, we start seeing what the new normal look like in the UK. But Mahendra also mentioned the new normal. Jason also mentioned it. I think it would be good to get a quick take from top fintech regulators in Indonesia on what this look like. And today we have with us Pak Triyono Gani. He's the head of fintech office at Indonesia's Financial Services Authority, or in short we call it OJK. He's also the executive director of the Digital Finance Innovation Group. Pak Triyono, I thought it would be good, now that we're talking around COVID-19, what's Indonesia's FSA relevant policies and reliefs in relation to COVID-19 and, you know, relevant to fintech industry? And perhaps more importantly, looking ahead medium term, what's the direction of travel for fintech regulations? As Jason mentioned, a regulation is vital on fintech. It would be good if you can elaborate on the licensing regime and perhaps some available incentives to encourage international fintech potentially considering entering to Indonesia. Pak Triyono, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Steven, His Excellency, Pak Mahendra, Bapak Ibu sekalian, and also my very good colleague, Jason. I think Pak Mahendra has already pointed out so many important information about Indonesia, and also Jason has shared very interesting experience how to deal with Indonesian market. And surprisingly, when I first met with Jason, it seems to me that Jason is still, you know, not grasping the market very well, but now he's very expert in all kind of Indonesian stuff, especially in the culture and also how to deal with Indonesians. I think congratulations to Jason, except your bahasa still working on that probably. Um, Talking about the fintech market, um, it's very difficult. It's a very broad topic and also difficult to start from where. But let me give some rough picture of the role of OJK in this fintech regulation. Um, I was assigned to be the head of fintech center in OJK with not knowing what to do because everybody is still seeing at the fintech, and it is very difficult to seek some risk sources or standards because the standard is not available in the world. I departed from the banking supervisory sector, which is a very highly established regulatory framework, and we can easily adopt everything just by looking at BIS policy, for example. The Basel Committee, that's the main theme that we are going to use in our banking regulation. But for fintech, nothing can be the standard. Even we see UK, we have tried. I recall in 2017 when we just developed this unit, I tried to contact FCA and also some regulators around the world, but they are also very not that open. I'm not saying they are very reluctant to get engagement with us, but it seems to me because of they are not ready to open their strategy, and we are very understood on the situation since we are in the same boat. So it is very difficult to get a reference. That's the basic thing that we experienced in 2017. So we don't have any other choice than build everything by our own. We hear and we learn from some other countries' experiences, their mistakes, and also their success story. And we design our own supervisory structure. And finally, we came up into the regulation number 13, 2018. It is issued in 2018. And we come up into a very principle-based regulation, the so-called our umbrella regulation. And we design a specific line for our licensing system. So it means that we create a new licensing line other than what we have used to have with the current financial institution licensing regime. We created a sandbox, and we also created 3 lines of licensing. The first is only the engagement, the so-called recorded, and then we have three layers of licensing until the top is the full license status. Why we create those 3 licenses? Because of the situation in 2017, I cannot really answer the question how many fintech companies in Indonesia, because they are really free and not really engaged with any single regulation, any single licensing need. So I think it is very free flow, and yeah, it is kind of very difficult situation out there. That's why we issued the regulation in 2018. We require them to at least report to us, make an engagement to us. And certainly because this is only an engagement, this is very light touch approach. This is also the directive from our President Jokowi. This is very light touch approach. All they have to do is, we are not talking about capital. We are not talking about the all the structural issues, but all you have to do is submit your idea, and then let's engage with us. Once we think that it is worth it to be considered in, or maybe it's a high potential in the market in the future, then we invite you to join our sandbox. That's it. So I think the first step of engagement is very, very light touch. And then after that, we are doing our sandbox process, which is very rigorous and also intensive discussion. The reason of that approach is that we want to get to know more about this particular innovation. And we don't really, previously, maybe I also share my experience when I was a banking supervisor. We are very black and white approach. If you don't comply with the regulations, so please go. But now, every single proposal will be considered to be discussed in our panel, the panel forum in OJK. So we are not going to reject every single crazy idea that come up into our market. When the panel decided that this business model can be beneficial to the public, then we would invite them to join our sandbox process. That's, again, this is very, very light touch approach. And then after we do the sandbox, it is very possible to issue new regulation with particular business model. For example, in our sandbox, we have at least 4 business models which are very significant in the participation of the fintech. The first, I can say, the information aggregator, and then the second would be the alternative in the scoring. And we are still very open for some other business model to deal with us. And then again, it is very, very possible for us to formulate a new regulation according to the demand in the market. So again, we are now preparing 4 new regulations in the information aggregator, alternative credit scoring, financial planner, and also the project financing regulation. So again, it shows to the market that we are very open and we are willing to hear what is really the dynamic in the market. And we also established the fintech center, the so-called Infinity. Infinity is a public space for me because everybody can come to us and then bring whatever they want to say. They can ask about our regulation, they can ask about our policy, whatever the reason, they can come to us, and then we are very, very open, like Jason just mentioned earlier. So I think I feel that this is very new approach, and comparing to what I had previously when I was a banking supervisor. So I think it is very open and also very accommodative and hearing what the industry needs. The biggest problem with us is not that in the sense of regulation, but certainly there are so many challenges on the coordination problem with not only with the Ministry of ICT, for example, but also with other ministers, because so many fintech models sometimes also involve on not only one regulators, but also could be in the combination of 1 or 2 regulators in at the same time. That's why in our sandbox process, we are also very open to invite Bank Indonesia, to invite Ministry of ICT, to invite the Ministry of Commerce. Everybody would be, and also the expert from outside. That's the picture of our market regulation. And also last week, I think we had a very interesting discussion with OVO about the potential to set up digital banking, for example. Again, this is very earlier discussion and research, but we are still very open for any possibility to probably issue the regulation on the digital banking. Again, we are very, very open, and we are very accommodative on every single market. And I just again want to highlight that we created a very new species, but we differentiate this new species, the innovators, with the former financial institution. Why? Because we don't want to have, for example, shadow banking operation or insurance, shadow insurance operation. I think it is very, we built a very, very strong barricades to not to, sometimes probably it is very high temptation for fintech to do a shadow banking operation. If you are the good fintech, I always told them, please be a good fintech. But if you are a bank, please be a good bank, because it is very also impossible for banks to lowering their risk standard, risk management standard, to get very low level quality of customer, because they are now served by the fintech industry. So we want to make this a very clear cut, that the fintech should serve underserved market. So the fintech would serve retail and also unbankable businesses and persons, but bank would be more formal on that. So I think if the fintech then have succeeded to upgrade the customer to be more bankable, so it means that it is time for that customer to then engage with a more formal financial institution. So I think so far that scenario is still working, even though some expert also asking us how can you maintain that purity, because it is again very, very high temptation for one fintech to be to do some shadow banking operation, for example. But we managed to purify that, and I think our Chinese walls is still strongly built to localize their operation into their own market segment. About the COVID-19, I think this is also something that we should consider, because of I think the fact that so many debtors and also customers now suffering from, especially in the financial matters. And I saw a lot of downgraded between, maybe for example, just before COVID-19, they are middle scale company, but now because of the COVID, they are now downgraded into more smaller scale company. So I can see that so many formal financial institution customer, now they are downgraded into more informal. So I can see that the number of fintech customer now is increasing. But this is the high potential that could be tapped by the fintech industry, certainly, because the opportunity is there now. The cake is bigger than before. But we have also conducted a very interesting survey just after the outbreak of this COVID-19. We conducted a survey to the financial sector, especially to the FinTech Association. Only 30%, around 30%, will benefit from the situation. I mean, probably in this case, OFO is just one of them, right? But 70% are suffering because of the market is now in trouble, because the purchasing power from the customer is also decreasing. This is very surprising to us, because we thought that this COVID-19 pandemic crisis would be giving very much benefit to the fintech industry, but actually not all fintech industry get the benefit from the crisis, even though even most of them are suffering. And when we ask them further, because of why they feel that this is very much troublesome for them, the main problem would be, first of all, certainly the purchasing power from the market is now decreasing, and also the funding from the investors is also in trouble, because so many commitments just get cancelled when we had a global pandemic crisis like the COVID-19. But and again, when after two months after the COVID crisis, I spoke to them once more about the potential. But now they feel that there's a turn back trend, and they think that because of the changing of the behavior of the customer, because now the customer is more keen to use digital channel comparing to the traditional channel. The customer doesn't want to queue in the bank, for example, or doesn't want to queue in the cashier, for example. So I think they're now keen to move slowly into the more digital transaction. And it is also surprisingly that the optimistic level of the digital financial industry is now picking up. And I believe that after this, there will be a very dramatic change with Indonesian customer behavior. They are more willing to do the digital financial transaction comparing to the traditional one. So in this case, I believe that our previous expectation when the crisis happens, the digital channel would be more preferable than the traditional one. So and it is a very good sense that OPPO is now helping government to extend the payment of G2P social security funds. I think this is also a good sign of how then digital transaction can be the backbone, the main backbone of our economy. And
Sure.
okay, and the last point is that I see there will be more proposal come to us because of again, like Jason mentioned, Indonesia is very creative. I think there will be more business model proposal come to OJK, and we should be very open on that. And I will be very ready to receive more proposal from the industry. And I can see that now the five-star hotel is offering the food delivery to the household, for example. This is a very good breakthrough in the business. And some museum or maybe a tour guide now offering artificial intelligence virtual tour, for example. So I think again, so many opportunities now open in the future and in the near future. And I believe that it will be then trickle down into the financial sector, and I will be ready to receive some new proposal on the financial technology. And the biggest challenge for us is that since we have to be working at home, and it will be somewhat a burden for us to perform our duty and task, and it is sometimes very easy to get in touch directly in person, but now we have to do everything by online. So again, it is a very difficult situation, but we are committed to perform as much as we can, and we would not delay any target and also any timeline that we have promised to the public. I think that's all for the first batch. I will certainly open for discussion and also question and answer. So I return to Stephen. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Batriano. And I think certainly OPPO is not the only one. There are many domestic and international fintech firms in Indonesia that commend OJK and the regulators around how open and this novel approach, having both formal and informal communications, whilst it is rather conventions, it's not written by rules. So I think those that benefit from really getting to know the regulators, trying to understand the needs of the country will benefit the most. And I certainly highlight the call to action there, Patriono, that welcoming UK fintechs who perhaps have proposals or have ideas that may benefit to Indonesia even further. That's
Sure.
for, I believe, existing players and those that may haven't even considered Indonesia yet, but maybe have some presence in Asia Pacific. A little bit more later, though, around this. So we are moving on to a Q&A discussion where we'll invite questions. I've been receiving a number of these, but please keep your questions coming. Please write down your name and your company, and then I'll going to call on you so that the admin can enable your video and audio access. But before going to the questions, I have a questions to Pak Triyono and Jason around building partnership for success for Indonesia case. Pak Wamen Mahendra earlier mentioned around the need for collaborating is important in the new normal. Jason also mentioned a lot about partnership, and yourself, Pak Triyono, with your more open and welcoming kind of sandboxes policy before OJK creating rules and policies that can be adjusted based on demand from the consumers as well as from the fintech industries. I think for some people, this concept of partnership are still not particularly clear, and I thought it would be good if you can outline a little bit around how do you position the fintech, the digital disruptors, the incumbent financial services, and some of them are actually quite unique, and some of the audience here are from the state-owned enterprises as well. What's the role of the state-owned enterprises, both at the telco, both at the banks level, and how this is all together? So perhaps I'll start with you first, perhaps, Pak Triyono, and then we can do Jason.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I think I also mentioned this previously, but my main message is that previously we expect the institutional licensing regime. It means that we give the license into institution. After we give the license institution, then the institution can do whatever they want to do according to the law that we has already assigned to them. But now we open up to everybody, so everybody can give financial services into the public. It is not really necessary to set up the financial institution first, but OVO can do P2P lending, for example. Even OVO is not a financial company, but they still can do financial activities that can extend the financial services. This is what we call the activity-based licensing. So we move from the institutional-based into the activity-based. And from activity-based, we are now enabled to allow telco company to do the financial services. It is very, very, very much welcome. Now Telkomsel has one company in our sandbox. They are going to do alternative credit scoring service, for example. It is very possible, and I think this is a very, very big breakthrough that we made comparing to the regime that we had previously. So again, it shows how open OJK to the public and to the industry. But remember that this is only the activity-based licensing. It means that you can only do one particular activity. If you want to do another activity or some other activities, it is very much welcome, but you should apply for more license. So in this sense, we are now collecting licenses. Yes, it is the consequences of activities licensing, but it is very fine. And it is very possible to create a super app, for example. It is very possible, but unfortunately, every single activities you should subscribe for every single license. And again, we would like to keep that in their perimeter, so they could not move into the more higher or a more advanced level of licensing system, because they are not a financial institution. If they want to do more, it means that you have to acquire financial institution, or maybe you should subscribe for a license for financial institution. So once you get the institutional license, it means that you can do whatever you want to do, and you don't have to apply for every single activity that you are going to make in your product line. Maybe that's the answer.
Thanks, Pak Triyono. Jason?
I'd like to, so, reflecting on some of Pak Triyono's points, first of all, I think working in collaboration, and, we talked about a large number of fintechs existing in Indonesia. And I think as initially a non-regulated entity, we've worked extensively in sandboxes where you have to work as an industry. So you have to have that maturity and mentality that you're working as an industry with a regulator to frame regulation. One of the things I'm very positive about with Indonesia is the way the regulation is growing at the same speed as fintech. I never feel fintech is behind or the regulation is behind. It's very cooperative. So if you look from a payment side, the way that QRIS, the standard QR, has been instigated and executed in Indonesia, and if you look from P2P lending, the way the lending governance was changed very early to protect the consumer. If we look to, say, China, that regulation was somewhat behind, and specifically in P2P lending, it was highly damaging for the consumer. So we have this, what I describe as a positive tension and a positive working relationship with fintechs as an organization and the regulator. And we also have two industry bodies here that represent us that we work together with as well. So, we have to work as an industry, and we have to be thought-provoking in terms of how the regulation and the fintech works. And I feel that balance here is very, very good. Secondarily, moving from a non-governed to a governed organization, OVO isn't a bank. We initially applied for a single license. Today we have a wealth of licenses. We're very lucky, but we have adopted strong governance. So we always try and be ahead of where our organization needs to be in terms of governance. So our president commissioner is an ex-Bank of Indonesia deputy governor, and we have strong governance in the organization. So every week I have a governance discussion with the president commissioner. We're always thinking about the regulation that are ahead of us. We're thinking about what happens in the future, how do we think about banking, what governance needs to be in place, and how does the organization need to work. We also look at architecturally the way we think about our different organizations, and that they align to the policy of the various regulators. So, for instance, we make sure there isn't cross-fertilization of data and of the other governance and policy issues. So my P2P lending organization is separate to my payments organization, is separate to my scoring organization. So we have to think structurally at a governance level of our organization as well. And because not all of that is clear today, to a degree, you have to think about how you're going to operate in 2 to 3 years' time. Otherwise, you find it limiting. There is also something that I've noticed that happens with us, that happens in any startup. We're only a 3-year-old company. You go through phases of growth, and those phases of growth often challenge the way that the regulator looks at you and you look at your business. So it's just a natural growth projection. So at the moment with OVO started life as a payments application. So we operate payments, and we operate payments as a service. So we're integrated into third-party applications. Now we're developing a breadth of financial services. So we're integrating with money market funds. We're working with gold as an alternative. We've launched insurance products. We have a new insurance policy, an insurance platform of our own that we're looking at and building. Now, there's many facets to our strategy in terms of financial services. So now there's a challenge in the application. Is the application of financial services, fintech application, or is it a payments application? How should we operate of the application? And this is a key growth milestone that we're going through. And first of all, we're trying to go through our own processes to make sense. I think, not even into the country, or as some of you already here, I see, you often can come through a process of development, but you also need to have an ongoing relationship with the regulator here that is fluid to be able to build, grow, and achieve these milestones. And the second point is you must operate as an industry as well.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. for instance. We've received a number of questions. Please do keep the questions coming. We'll hope to go through that in less than 10 minutes if possible. So please, let's keep our answers brief. So from Manu Pelletero, would you be able to turn on your video and unmute yourself, please? You have questions around open banking. Manu Pelletero. Do we have Manu?
Yeah, I'm here. Just a second. I'm just turning my video on my camera. Guys, can you see me and hear me now?
We can hear you okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for putting this nice event. It's very insightful. Well, my name is Manu Pelletero. I'm the founder and CEO of Invest.ai. We're a data analytics platform for banking data. We're a fintech company based in Scotland. Most of our customer base is either Scotland or Spain. I'm Spanish national, but I'm now in Indonesia. I'm working from Jakarta, from the MCC building. So my question is related to open banking. I'd like to understand a bit better what's the position and the strategy that the Indonesian Central Bank or the regulator is applying open banking. Is this on your horizon? Is there any open banking platform, sandbox, or regulation coming through that is copying like what's happening in the UK, what's happening across Europe, or closer to the Indonesian shores in Singapore? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Manuel. And we'll just take a couple more. Since you're a Scottish fintech, we have a senior representative from Fintech Scotland. Michael, if you're on the line, can you ask your question? And perhaps, Michael, if you could share some of the thoughts around Scottish fintech firms who are now beginning to internationalize, what sort of things in their mind?
Hi, Stephen, and thank you for organizing this event. Hi, Manu, nice to see you. I know we've got a call and a virtual coffee after this conference. Yeah, very happy to speak a bit about the Scottish fintechs. As you say, the COVID-19 situation is actually a great opportunity for fintechs, and it's been said before that the fintechs have the power to really help companies, help citizens, help society recover from these difficult times. Manu is a great example of fintech that is just doing that through the power of data, open banking, things that will allow people to get onboarded more easily or access services, or indeed some of the work he's been doing in Scotland around accessing benefits, which is fantastic. So Scotland, as Indonesia, is open for business. We welcome many companies coming to Scotland, an average of one a month coming from all around the world. But we'd like to see a lot more fintechs going from Scotland to Indonesia and other countries as well. And I think Manu's question around open banking is something that's very hot on the Scottish agenda at the moment. There's some news coming soon. It's embargo just now, so I can't tell you what it is, but keep an eye on what's happening in Scotland. Big news around open banking. But indeed, we'd like to take the open banking knowledge we've built in Scotland in this kind of center for excellence, and then go around the world and export those technologies and experience that we have.
Thanks, Michael. And then probably let me just ask last one for the first round of questions. Kevin McAdam, Global Processing Services. If Kevin on the line. Kevin McAdam. Don't know whether he's on the line or not, but probably let's just kind of take that as a first round on the open banking. Patrino, do you want to take that question?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think this is very interesting, and I believe that we are very nervous in adopting this situation, because our neighbors has issued some at least directive on the open banking regulation. But I think Indonesia is not the same as Singapore or Hong Kong. They are very much advanced in the banking industry. But for Indonesia, we still have very traditional operation in banking. That's why we should be very, very careful in implementing this regulation. Our approach now, or maybe before I share our approach, it has been a very interesting streams in Indonesia. We have two kind of streams. The first is the banking, who is going to be open banking. And the banking, so I'm talking about the formal one, the financial institution one. But the second is the big tech company who is going to be open banking. So I think they are now meeting in one point. And according to my personal view, this is a kind of convergence process that is happening, and it is also aligned with our roadmap. Our roadmap is we expect fintech to be more collaborative and also meeting in certain point from the technology stream and also from the financial sector stream. Accommodating these streams in our market, we are now prepared to have a research and also the sandbox for the open banking. So I think it is very timely if you have a proposal for opening up an open banking operation in Indonesia. You should directly engage to us, and then we can then formalize everybody into one sandbox process so that we can have an intensive discussion. And also we would like to hear what are the strategy, what are the proposal coming up from the market, so that we can formulate whether what kind of regulation that we should formulate in the future. Again, it will take some not that fast or very quick, because we should talk not only in the perspective of financial opportunity, but we should also talk about how to protect the customer, how to protect the market, how to also manage the risk in terms of IT and also some other risk aspect as well. So it will be a very, very long discussion, and I would not expect to issue regulation in 1 year, for example, because again, we should be very carefully managing this issue. But we are now hearing every single proposal in open banking, and we are very open to receive more proposal on that. Steve.
Sure, thank you, Pak Triyono. And Accenture actually did quite a lot of work around open banking with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and MAS as well in Singapore. So certainly happy to provide inputs further on that. Right. For the second round questions, if I can perhaps get Kevin McAdam to bring you still on, but you're struggling for the technicalities. Are you still on the line, Kevin? And I'll also invite Luella Zarkila for questions. If you're on the line, Luella and Kevin, please ask your questions. I believe the admin will allow you to speak now, I suppose. Again, I think they're probably struggling to turn on their, or to unmute themselves. Perhaps questions from Alan Lai from UK ASEAN Business Council. Alan, you're on the line.
Hello, Stephen, and hello everybody in London and in Jakarta. Selamat pagi. Selamat. I'm Alan, Business Council. ASEAN Business Advisory, and one thing they'd like us to start work on with is on fintech specifically, and looking at how fintech can.
Sorry, Alan, I think you're really breaking. That I don't think we'll be able to get your questions. Perhaps if you want to just use audio only, so without video, probably that's better coming from your side.
Sure.
Much better.
Is that better? Thank you, Stephen. I was just saying if the panel could just expand a little bit on how fintech can help the marginalized in society.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you.
Perhaps I'll thank you, Alan, for the questions on the poorest part of the society and kind of the broader financial inclusion agenda. And I know Jason and Ovo, financial inclusion is also one of the core of what you do. Do you want to just quickly comment on Alan's question, please?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Alan. So I think, the way we work in conjunction with a number of platforms, Tokopedia and Grab specifically, that bring services into the emerging middle economy and the lower economy is critical. So, with everything from deploying the first mobile device, education on the device, etc. So, when I first came to Asia, we acquired a business called Kudo. Kudo is an agent network, and it really allowed people in a local community outside the city centres, in the real heartland of Indonesia, to be able to access online shopping. At the time, we did some, very basic things of looking at 5 staple products, and such as a wok, a rice cooker, etc. The price differentiation was around 50%. So buying from a traditional multi-tiered distribution model to buying direct from one of our agents was 50% more expensive. So there's a whole wealth of things that we do once the mobile is deployed into the neighborhood. Whether that mobile becomes connected to a small ecosystem, a community, or whether it's directly used as an individual, as an SME product, is often down to entrepreneurialism here. But I think the e-commerce platform and the shared economy platform has been huge for growth in Southeast Asia.
Sure. Thanks, Jason, on that. And I believe that brings us to a close from a Q&A perspective. And may I also invite the Chargé d'Affaires Interim Head of Mission at the Indonesian Embassy in London for some closing remarks. Pak Adam Tugio.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Let me first, extend our appreciations to His Excellency Vice Ministers, Bapak Mahendra Siregar, Bapak Triyono, and Pak Jason, for your times to share some light on the potentials business, the fintech industry in Indonesia. I think we have already heard from different, from the panelists that the opportunity for fintechs is quite huge in Indonesia, and in fact during the COVID, as already highlighted by Vice Ministers Mahendra, Bapak Mahendra, we see that the digital economy is thriving in Indonesia, and in fact this is one of the important elements which connect Indonesia during the difficult times. And I think with the Gojek, with the service delivery service, is really helping Indonesia in difficult times. So we don't need to find difficulties to to get service, food, or other important necessity for at homes. We can just order the Gojek and they will send the necessity to our our homes. And this is something that is really interesting to learn. And I think we have a privilege also to see some of the interest from the business UK in trying to learn more about the Indonesian fintech ecosystems, especially on the regulatory framework. Pak Triyono also mentions very interesting element on the informal process of sandboxing. Try to get input and also to accommodate the new proposals or new perspective on how to do business in the fintech sector in Indonesia. Pak Jason also presented this very interesting stories about how the OVO survived and it's now become one of the unicorn of the fintech industry in Indonesia. And from this dialogue, I think what transpired from us that the digital economy is growing fast in Indonesia, and it will accelerate further in the years to come. We hear some challenges, hitchcock probably there is, but as OVO experience reveals that, you know, for those who dare to become pioneer in Indonesia, they will also have the opportunity to become the triumphant in Indonesia digital economy. So this is the message that I would like to underscore for today from today's discussions. And I think let me close by once again emphasizing the strong commitment from our side to facilitate the interest of the UK business, the fintech industries. If you have any inquiries or want to have more information, feel free to shoot us an email. So we are more than happy to connect you with the appropriate institutions in Jakarta. Thank you very much once again for the participations of all who make your times to to come and attending this Zoom meeting today. Thank you very much, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Adam. And before I hand it over to the Minister Counselor of Economic Affairs at the Indonesian Embassy, Pak Mas Awin, I thought, a fantastic discussion. Thanks to great speakers, insights from Pak Mahendra, Pak Wamen Mahendra, as well as, audience. Hopefully you find this helpful. Drop us some feedback. I believe this is one of the first sessions where we really highlight Indonesia's digital economy opportunities. Let us know. Please drop some feedback to the organizer. We'd love to hear from you and how you find it. And for some follow-ups, either those in Jakarta or Indonesia, Indonesian Embassy representatives here. We also have London-based representatives of the Central Bank Indonesia, IIPC London, as well as ASGIBA as the go-to community for professional executives abroad. So please do so. Our highest appreciation goes to the following institution, as this session is initiated and led by the Indonesian Embassy, working together with the Central Bank of Indonesia, IIPC London, with GIPA, with all of our amazing supporting partners that I mentioned earlier at the beginning. Now, without further ado, Mas Awin.
Thank you everyone for the very engaging discussion, and hopefully you enjoyed the session. I wish also to once again thanks our eminent speakers for their excellent contributions. For more events, please stay connected at the Indonesian Embassy ID on Instagram, FB, and Twitter. Thank you and see you next time.